In this tutorial, I'm gonna show you how to animate this fuzzy and bouncy cat from start to finish. I'm gonna be using an iPad and the RoughAnimator app. You can follow along in almost any animation app of your choice. The only time it's really RoughAnimator specific is when I'm gonna draw the fur and the fuzzy effect around the cat. First, I'm just setting the canvas size of my animation to 1920 by 1920 to have a little bit more resolution. Then I'm selecting the background layer and setting it to a more warm and comfy color because I don't like to draw for hours on white. Then let's go into the first layer that I named Sketch. That's where we will sketch out the rough animation of the cat. I try to simplify the form of the cat as much as possible. So here it's mostly just a curved triangle and a very simplified cat head. And that's the standing/sitting position. Then I create the next keyframe, which will be the next key position. It will be the cat in the familiar loaf form, like a nice bread that's baking. This one is basically just a flattened oval and the same cat head on top. With both keyframes in place, I can now start doing the in-betweens. Since the transition between the two keyframes happens very swiftly, I do the main action in one frame. And to really sell it, I do a mix between squash and stretch and a smear frame with the head right here. And the same thing with the body. I try to imagine what would be the position right before it switches into the other pose. And here I try to go with something that feels good and not necessarily something that is anatomically accurate. Here in the rough animation and sketch phase is actually the time to go crazy and try something creative, try to break the forms and just try crazy things and see what works. Also, everybody knows that cats are shapeshifters, so this really works to your advantage here. Next thing, after I've drawn the two keyframes and the two in-betweens, I just try to figure out the timing between both of them. So I extend the keyframe to make it linger in each key position. As you can see here, it stays 3 frames in the key position, then it goes to an in-between for 1 frame, and then it stays 3 frames in the other key position, and then again 1 frame of in-between. Because the transitions are obviously still all too hard, I introduce more in-betweens to settle into the positions, and I kind of apply a slight wobble effect whenever they transition fast. As well as the overshooting of the head, so it goes past the position and then settles into the final position like a spring. So by the end I also end up replacing all the held keyframes with actual in-betweens and more frames that are giving more life to the entire animation. Mainly by following the 12 basic principles of animation that you might have heard about. So now for a while I'm just drawing the in-betweens here. While this is going on, I might lose a few words how to draw cats in general. So before I even started this animation, I was already sketching many cats. I was looking at my own cats, doing a couple of live drawing sessions in a way. But also what really helps is looking at how other people sketch cats, trying to deconstruct the ways that they are abstracting forms and then kind of taking what works for you and applying it. I wouldn't even consider myself some kind of specialist in drawing cats or anything. I find it actually quite hard to draw cats, especially for the first time. So it really helps to put in the work before you start an animation, to get familiar with all the forms that cats can take. And again, the main thing is like simplifying. As you see here, I simplified the forms so much that it's basically just blobs, which are easy to draw and easy to animate, because in the end, everything is just like a bouncing ball. And a bouncing ball is easy to animate, but it has also a lot of life in a way. On the other hand, if you're trying to animate something more realistic and you don't really have the knowledge or the reference, it will come out as very stiff. So when simplifying, you can animate even something that you don't have proper knowledge about by abstracting it and imagining it to be moving like multiple bouncing balls. Why do I have to giggle every time I say bouncing balls? Okay, once we finished with the rough animation, we can finally start colorizing. So let's create a new layer, call it color head. I'll be separating between the head and the body because I want to apply some effects later on, some shading, and for that I need different layers. Let's select the color we're going to paint with. I'm going with an orange. So now when we're painting the colored outline of the head, let's leave a bit of space to the actual rough outline that we painted, because later when we put in the fur, it will get all wider again. You will see in a couple of moments why. And then fill in the shape that you've just drawn. And take a look at my fill settings. The important bits are fill expand 4 pixels, fill in front, and sample this layer. So here you see me creating already the next layer, which is color body. My idea is basically to finish up the entire cat drawing with the fur, the face and the effects and everything, to estimate how many layers I need to animate and if the effects are gonna work out the way I want with the number of layers I imagine. And again, don't forget to draw the body thinner than the rough outline that you've drawn before. Now for me, the most fun part starts. It's where I'm gonna be drawing in the fur. I create again a new layer called hair body. That's where the fur for the body is gonna go. So to achieve the fur effect, you will actually need special brushes. So the specific brush I will be using here, I will provide in a Gumroad link below that you can get for free. And if you want more options, I actually created a set of 12 different fur brushes. Each one is a little bit different and achieves a different kind of fur effect. And with the link below, you actually get it 60% off the normal offer. So here I have finally selected the brush I'm actually using and the one that you can download for free. And again, take a look at the exact brush settings here. The most important thing here is the randomized brush rotation. It makes the fur look more random because it rotates the tip every time it's applied. And then be sure to select a big brush size. I have here 144 pixels because you want to be sure to see each individual hair when you draw it. And another important thing is the spacing. Use something between 16 and 50, depending on how dense you want the brush to draw. And then you start filling in the fur on the new layer that you just created. Just go along the outline of the color layer that you created and not leave any gaps, that it looks nice and thick and dense. And then let's do the same for the head. Here we also create a new layer and paint in the fur. One thing I do differently on the cat's head is I leave the ears empty because the fur there is not as dense, and I want to preserve the shape. Now that I got the look that I wanted and figured out all the layers, I proceed to paint in each individual layer and all the frames for each individual layer. So again, starting with the base color of the body, doing all the frames of the body, then doing all the frames of the head, then doing all the frames of the body hair, and then doing all the frames of the head hair. Also again, remember to leave some space for the fur and not draw the body outline to the rough outline that you've drawn, because the fur will always take some space, as you have seen. So now I will speed up this section a bit, because as you see, it's quite a meditative process. It takes a while. Yeah. Also a little note about my recording. As you might have seen, it's all a bit sped up. It's because by accident I recorded it in 2 times speed. with 30 frames per second, so whenever I slow it down it might look a little bit choppy, and the rest of the video is very sped up. I'm sorry about that, it was by mistake. Next time I'll record it in 1x speed and just speed it up in the editing tool when I need it. Okay, once I'm finished painting these 4 layers, what I do is create a backup of the file, because I don't want to do any mistakes that are irreversible at this point. So I just go out into the project view and duplicate the file first. And the next thing I do is merging the body color layer with the body hair fur layer. First thing you want to do is put the fur layer for the body hair directly above the body color layer. Then you select the fur layer by clicking into any frame of this layer, and then click on Modify Layers and select the option Merge Down. And do the same for the head layers as well. Next thing I want to do is add some shading on the body layer just below the head to define the head and bring it a little bit more forward. For that I select the slightly darker shade of orange that I will be shading with, and it's still the same brush as before, but this time we want to set the opacity really low. I set it here to 10% and also put the spacing to right above about 24. That way we can really achieve this subtle shading with a slow gradient, and we still have the texture of the fur because we're continuing to use the fur brush. And then just go in frame by frame and draw that shading in just below the head. One super smart thing that I actually forgot to do here is also do this one extra setting with the brush. There where it says right now draws in front, it's better to select draw inside, because then it's like an alpha lock. It will only draw inside the pixels that are already in this layer. So then there's no possibility to draw outside the fur and the body that you've already drawn. I only realized it later in the process that I forgot to select it. Yeah, but normally I would always select it. It helps a ton. Okay, cool. So now it has already more depth and looks more interesting in general. So now we're only one detail away from finalizing this project, and that's the face. So let's create again a new layer for the face. Let's select a normal round brush to draw the details, and let's start with the eyes. I select a slightly off-white color for the eyeball color. Let's create some big round eyes to make the cat as cute as possible. Then for the pupil and the mouth, I select a darker brown tone. The nose itself is like a downwards pointing triangle, and then we connect it with a line to the mouth, which is just 2 more lines. Then we go again frame by frame and paint in the individual parts of the face. I start with the eyes, the white of the eyes, draw that in first, then the pupils, and then the rest of the face. The trickiest part will be the smear frame. So what I'm doing here is just I'm elongating the forms. You can be creative here. For example, you could draw multiple eyes that are following the trail of the movement. Now for the final touches, I want to paint the highlights of the eyes. For that I'll do a bigger circle on the top right of the eye and a smaller little circle in the bottom left of the eye. And then repeat that for all the frames. And then I experiment a bit with different drop shadows and other effects in the background, but in the end I decide to drop it. The only thing I end up doing as a cleanup is select all the frames by pressing Edit Multiple in the top right, and then I select all the body frames and just clean up the bottom line across all the frames by using the eraser. Yeah, and that's it. Here you can see once again the final result, our fuzzy, bouncing cat. If you like this tutorial and want to support this channel, you can buy the brushes below, either the fur brushes. I have also a free texture brush pack that you can check out if you go on to my Gumroad. And yeah, otherwise subscribe, like. If you have any questions, write it in the comments. I'll try to answer as soon as possible. And yeah, see you next time. If you want to learn more about animating in RoughAnimator, you can also check out my other tutorials on my channel, or the ones that are linked here hopefully.